Welcome back. The South African Police Service recently launched a Chinese Community and Police Cooperation Centre in Port Elizabeth. This is the 13th such centre to be opened nationally. Now, Eastern Cape Police Commissioner Lizzie Wenjinga says the service has benefited by finding its role in order to further the existing relations within the Chinese community. Many have raised concerns about the nature of relations between the South African government and China. Now, to discuss the issue, we're joined by the South African Institute for International Relations Affairs senior researcher, and that's Dr. Kobus van Staden. Dr. van Staden, thank you very much for your time. Should South Africans be suspicious of a center like this or a cooperation between the Chinese community and the South African Police Service? By the way, this is the 13th center nationally to be opened now.
Yes, as you say, there's been several such centers opened, and the Chinese community in South Africa has done a lot to work with the South African police. I think generally this is a pretty positive development in the sense that there are China-Africa related kind of crime activity happening, poaching and smuggling of wildlife products being one particular one. And if it's for the community to work with the police in order to crack down on some of these problems, then it seems like a pretty positive development to me.
All right. So what then are South Africans to make of the Chinese in other African countries where China is said to be colonizing those African states as a result of the amount of debt that those countries have with China?
That narrative I find quite problematic. In the first place, China's doing business in Africa, so it might be very unequal, it might be problematic, but it has nothing, there's no way to compare it with the level of violence, control, destruction that was European colonialism. So I think colonialism isn't the right word. In the second place, debt is a big problem, but Africa owes a lot of debt to Western institutions as well. And in fact, China has only about 20% of African debt at the moment. The rest is frequently to Western private, lenders, which frequently charge much higher interest rates. So Chinese debt is an issue, and it's an issue that African countries should look at, but China isn't responsible for Africa's whole debt problem. Africa's debt problem is more complicated than that.
What would the benefits of such a cooperation be, Dr. van Staden? What kind of strategies would China help us with in terms of fighting crime in the country, but also the kinds of crimes that are perpetrated in Chinese communities in South Africa?
Well, the Chinese community works with the South African police, as you said, and so a lot of the problems that come up are problems that are also in other communities in South Africa, which includes illicit financial flows, smuggling, those kind of issues. So I don't necessarily think that it's that useful to turn it into a Chinese problem. This is a South African crime problem. And South Africa is a complicated country with lots of communities, which means that policing this kind of crime is a complicated thing. I think that there is a lot to be gained from cooperation between the two governments on crime and law enforcement issues. But of course, in all cases, South Africa needs to make sure that their own house is in order and also that they are led by the South African Constitution.
All right, Dr. Kobus van Staden talking to us about this 13th centre. Thank you very much for your time. 13th centre to be opened in South Africa nationally, and it's called a Chinese Community and Police Cooperation Centre, and of course the latest being opened in Port Elizabeth.